In this video, we're talking about a very important concept, which is called a burden of proof. This is very important in criminal cases. It's something that you've probably heard about if you've ever watched a lawyer movie or a crime TV show. It's called beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest level, it's the highest burden of proof that the government must meet in order to find somebody guilty. What many people don't know or what haven't heard about is all of these other different levels, these different standards of proof that exist in the law. And we're going to talk about some of the most common. And how this works is we have a chart here. We have a series of steps ranging from the smallest amount of evidence to the most amount of evidence in order to reach different levels of proof. And so we're going to run through those and explain how those might apply in a criminal case. And more specifically, what evidence the government must meet in order to actually support a guilty conviction. So we'll start down here. If we start down here, the government has not presented their case. And so of course there cannot be any guilt, there cannot be any conviction. But if the government presents all of their evidence, presents their testimony, and they present nothing to support a conclusion of guilt, that means they presented no evidence. And so if you start here and you take a step up and the government has presented no evidence, you're going to be found not guilty. Okay, an NG, not guilty. The next level up is what's called a scintilla of evidence. This is a legal standard. A scintilla of evidence means almost no evidence, but a very small amount, just a speck of evidence, and that is not enough to support a conviction in a criminal case. So if the government presents a scintilla of evidence and you stand at this step, it's another not guilty. The next level up is what's called reasonable suspicion. And this is where there's more evidence. It's reasonable for somebody to be suspicious, to believe that this may or may not have happened, but it's reasonable for somebody to have some level of suspicion. If the government presents that, meaning that it's reasonable for a jury to think that that activity was suspicious, that may be suspicious, but that's not guilty. So if they present evidence that meets this level, that's another not guilty. PC, this is the next step up. This is what's called probable cause. So this means that there's a next level up. There's a bit more evidence than reasonable suspicion, but it's still not enough to meet the government's burden to support a finding of guilt in a criminal case. And so even if they have probable cause to believe that there's something that happened that was something criminal in nature, it's still not guilty here. The next level up is what's called preponderance of the evidence. This means that it's more likely than not, based on the preponderance of the evidence, based on everything that has been presented, that it's more likely than not that this actually happened, that this person did it, and still not guilty. Still not guilty here. The next level up is what's called clear and convincing evidence. So this is when it's firmly believed, that it's pretty clear, it's convincing, we have strong beliefs, it's evidently clear that this person did this, they're responsible for it. This is a legal standard that's used in case law throughout the country, just like all these others. Still, not enough to find somebody guilty of a crime. Not guilty here. The next level is what's called reasonable doubt. If there is doubt, any amount of doubt that's reasonable about what happened in a particular criminal case, if there's any reasonable doubt at all, still not guilty here. Still not guilty. The only way that you can find somebody guilty in a criminal case is if you can go beyond a reasonable doubt, meaning if there's any doubt based in reason, and you can still find that beyond that, the amount of evidence is beyond any single reasonable doubt that a person committed a crime, only then can that person be found guilty. Okay, so this is where it's very important to understand that there are all of these different standards. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest in our law, and that means that The government has a lot of hurdles to jump through. So just because something may have happened, or just because you believe that the evidence is insurmountable, you have to remember when you start a case, any criminal case, you start down here. We don't have to disprove that anything happened. We don't have to disprove a single item. At this point, at the beginning of any criminal case, you are 100% innocent. It's the government's job, it's their responsibility to prove that you are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's all these different levels of culpability where you could be falling into this category, into one of these categories, but that doesn't mean that you're guilty. So remember that. When you come to our office, when you want to speak with our team, it's not our job to disprove that anything happened at all. It's the government's job to prove it. We don't have to give them an inch. They have to earn it, right? And they have to do a job that proves it beyond any single reasonable doubt, because reasonable doubt at this level is not enough. They have to prove beyond the reasonable doubt. So I hope this helps understand. I help you understand a little bit more about how our law works here. Hopefully you don't find yourself in this situation, but if you do, give our office a call. We offer free case evaluations. We're happy to sit down with you and talk about the strengths of your case and how you can put this whole situation behind you and come out with the least damage possible. Thanks for watching.